there's a slight delay in technology here, so which is okay because it's not going to come in until a certain part in Alison's talk anyway. So just bear with us. There are a couple of seats up front here, so you don't have to stand. Thank you all for coming, especially in this beautiful weather, which we called out just for Professor Alison Hearn, who came here from Canada, so we wanted to make sure that we showed her exactly what living in SoCal is all about. So I appreciate you all coming out for it. Professor Hearn is a professor in the Department of Media Studies at the University of Western Ontario, and she is going to present some of her newer work today, which is part of a book project on a kind of broader prehistory of self-branding, and which she's been working on for quite some time. Alison's work has been, she has written about all sorts of different components of branding, self-branding, and brand culture in the last several years. She's kind of the perfect example of what interdisciplinary work looks like. She kind of expertly weaves through cultural analysis, political economy, Marxist labor studies, and cultural industry studies. And so for all of you who are kind of thinking about what that kind of interdisciplinary work looks like, please check out her work because it's really excellent. She's published in the Journal of Consumer Culture, in Continuum, and Ephemera. I will, since this talk is on self-branding, be a little bit self-promotional here, and she has a piece in my new book on commodity activism called Brand Me Activist, which is on the branding of social activism and activists. Thank you. Yeah, if you're kind of self-branding and you don't get applause, it doesn't really work. So, I will say, too, that I always feel like in my own work on branding that I'm kind of chasing Alison Hearn. So I think I have this brilliant idea, like, I want to write about the history, the university and branding. And someone will say, oh, have you seen Alison Hearn's article on that? It's brilliant. Okay, I want to write about ranking and rating mechanisms. Oh yeah, Alison Hearn just wrote this excellent article on that. So I do have it's a little bit of a fraught relationship here. In any case, this talk is again part of this larger book project, on the prehistory of self-branding. It is called Sentimental Greenbacks of Civilization on the carte de Visite and the prehistory of self-branding. So please join me in welcoming Alison Hearn.
I'm not sure whether I should stand or sit. I think I might sit. You want me to stand? All right, fine. I have to go over here and be podium. Okay, well, totally thrilled to be here even though it's raining. I know that tomorrow the sun will come out because it is Southern California. And I want to thank Sarah so much for inviting me and for Meryl for helping me make it all work out. And it's so great to see you all here, and it's a thrill to be here at Annenberg. The paper that I'm going to mostly be reading to you today is sort of extracted from a broader piece. And so I kind of lost a lot of the theory and maybe the more boring sort of framework for it. But it's really, and it's part of a larger book project, as Sarah said, that is looking at some of the ways over the last 150, 160 years in which subjectivity or modes of self-presentation have become immanent to processes of capitalist accumulation. So in other words, how has the self become a kind of token by which we can make money? And of course, the obvious way that we would think about this would be in the form of celebrity. But I wanted to, but now that the logic and the discourse of self-branding or branding has been applied to the self, I wanted to go back further in time and think about sort of earlier moments. So how has the self, in all of its specificity and particularity, and yet conditioned or imprinted by overarching, heavily mediated and codified logics of visibility, right, and behavior, come to present itself as a form of value, specifically economic value. So I'm just going to launch right into the paper, and then hopefully we'll have time if there are some questions afterwards. In a world marked by ever-deepening economic and environmental uncertainty, where traditional jobs are disappearing and capitalism is in perpetual crisis, achieving celebrity status has come to seem as reasonable a life goal as any other. These days, money and power follow iconic visibility, and it appears everyone wants to get in on the act. While Snooki and the Situation of MTV's Jersey Shore have taken getting paid for being themselves to lucrative new heights, universities offer seminars to students on how to successfully self-brand for the job market. A recent study conducted right here by the Children's Digital Media Center found that fame was not only the value most propagated in current mainstream children's TV, but had become the #1 aspirational value across the American tween population in general. And I know this because my stepdaughter wants to be famous. Online, a Google number or a clout score offer to measure the power of an individual's reputation, while other services compete to protect or obliterate corporate or individual brands for a fee. In this context, personal disclosure and surveillance have become chic, and for some, developing a reputation for having a reputation has become a full-time job. But this obsession with celebrity and self-branding didn't come out of nowhere. The practices of self-promotion found in the Facebook profile or the reality TV participant have historical antecedents, whose contours can tell us much about processes of capitalist accumulation and the shifting relationship between subjectivity and economic value in the contemporary moment. So in this paper, I want to argue that contemporary forms of self-promotion express a historically specific type of connection between forms of selfhood and economic value. But they have their roots in the heyday of industrial capitalism in the mid-19th century. And in so doing, I want to explore an old story of a new medium. That's the carte de visite, or card photograph. All the rage across Europe and North America in the 1860s and 70s, carte de visite were small, inexpensive paper portrait photographs mounted on cardstock that were exchanged and collected by all classes of people. The phenomenon, referred to as cartomania, took hold in 1861 and was over by the late 1870s as newer imaging technologies, specifically the box camera and roll film, took hold. During their time, cartes worked to entrench and commercialize the profession of photography, democratize access to self-presentation, and introduce easily standardizable visual codes and conventions for respectable selfhood. Most often collected in albums, carte de visite also served to construct and solidify family narratives and extend networks of sociality. But perhaps most significantly, in their claims to access representational truth and simultaneously generalize and disperse visual codes for respectable selfhood, cartes functioned as image tokens, working to both palliate and exacerbate the various crises in markets, money, and economic value that were taking place at the time. Finally, as many people collected portraits of people they didn't even know, cartomania raised issues around the ownership of self-image and initiated forms of temporary celebrity. Previously unknown people would find themselves nominated as popular collectibles due to their attractive faces. Poised on the verge of consumer capitalism and the rise of the advertising and marketing industries, carte de visite can be seen to have inaugurated the processes of self-promotion with which we are all now so familiar. Over the past 150 years in North America and Europe specifically, modes of self-presentation have become increasingly and complicatedly conditioned by the advances of capitalism and its ever-evolving search for new forms of value. Extending and doubling its role as repository of labor power, with the rise of modernity, the self increasingly becomes imprinted with the logics of capital. It becomes, in Andrew Wernick's terms, a commodity sign, functioning both as a worker and as a bearer of a promotional message about work and social value in general. Anyone's worked at Abercrombie & Fitch, they know what that means to be a commodity sign. Through an examination of prototypical imprint of self-promotion, the carte de visite, I hope to illuminate more clearly how subjectivity in all of its variability has become immanent to processes of capitalist accumulation, how the other-directed I has become money. So, just a few really, really quick sort of theoretical outlines here. As Warren Sussman, among others, has claimed, our dominant concepts about who we are what we value and how we might relate to each other have always existed in tension with economic, cultural, technological, and aesthetic forms and codes that are available to us. Much as we yearn for individuality and uniqueness, the fact remains that we all bear the imprints of our socioeconomic context to some degree, and of course in highly variable ways. I use the word imprint here in order to recall the concept of the imprimatur, a term that originally referred to an ecclesiastical declaration approving the publication of a book and rendering an assurance that the book didn't contravene the edicts of the Catholic Church. Of course, the term now commonly refers to a publisher's mark, or even more generally to the approval or endorsement of someone in a position of power. But as Emanuele Leonardi points out, the notion of the imprimatur also, and this is a quote, recalls the constitutive indeterminacy of the impression of a photographic plate before subsequent treatments bring it to full development. It discloses the virtual edges of an image without filling in the actual content. So the use of the concept of the imprint, then, isn't intended to suggest a finality or complete determinacy, but rather to illuminate the broadest outlines and conditions of possibility of that which is being imprinted. In this case, forms of selfhood under the conditions of nascent consumer capital. So an imprimatur can be said to involve a set of endorsed parameters within which a sell for a product or an object or service can be successfully